Welcome to Victims and Villains, a podcast extension of the nonprofit that educates and engages individuals on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name is Captain Nostalgia. I'm one of the writers and podcasters here, and I am joined by our friends from the Feel and Film podcast. What's going on, Mr. Kales, Black Nerd Magic?
What's going on out there, beautiful people? How you doing?
I'm really excited about this because this is actually kicking off our brand new series where we're going to be dissecting all 5 Matrix movies in anticipation to the long-awaited Matrix Resurrections. How are you feeling about this movie?
I feel confident actually because there would be no good reason for one of the Wachowski sisters to bring back this franchise if it wasn't for a good reason. I know that when it was announced, people were like, Matrix 4, like, what is going on here? Because Matrix Revolutions came out in 2003. So it's been like a 17, 18-year hiatus. But once I saw the trailer and the use of White Rabbit in it, I was immediately jazzed for it. And I'm excited to see what's in store.
So I haven't seen any trailers for this movie yet. I've seen the marketing they've been doing. These posters have been absolutely killing it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that I know about this movie is that I want to get your opinion on this. Laurence-Fishburne, Morpheus himself, was not invited back to do these. He's the only cast member that wasn't. And in his place is Candyman, Dr. Manhattan himself, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II.
I was sad when I found out that Laurence wasn't going to be back because, I mean, Morpheus, he's an iconic character. I mean, you can't really, outside of Neo for the Matrix, when you hear about the Matrix, you think of Morpheus. And so when I heard that he wasn't going to be around, I was kind of shaking my head a little bit. But then I saw that Yahya is going to be playing a new form of Morpheus, an alternate form of Morpheus. So I'm wondering how that's going to play out. I'm wondering if it's just going to be Neo going to a different form of the Matrix. Like maybe the Matrix has changed up or something like that. And Morpheus is now a new kind of guy, but maybe he's different. Maybe he does things different from Lawrence's version of the character. I haven't heard any details. I just knew that Yahya was cast. So he's one of my favorite actors at the current moment. So that's something to be looking forward to.
That guy, I'm convinced at this point can do like not a bad role. I was rewatching Candyman earlier, like last week, and I was just like enthralled by how good he was and how excellent of a movie that film actually is. But it's interesting because I don't really remember anything about The Matrix. This was the first time I've watched it since I was a kid. For this movie, I've never seen Animatrix. I've never seen Reloaded. I've never seen Revolutions. So like all of this stuff in this series is going to be so new to me. It feels like fresh eyes, and there's so much about this movie I forgot. But to your point, there is a scene where in this movie, Morpheus gets captured by Hugo-Weaving's character, and in that he actually talks about how like there was a original version of the Matrix, and it was kind of supposed to be this like Second Life version where humanity was supposed to have their perfect world. And so it leads me to wonder how many, and especially if this is like different Morpheus, how many different versions of the Matrix are actually out there.
Well, the Matrix is a simulation. So, I mean, there's nothing to say that there could be like millions of simulations out there and Neo just happens to drop into a new one that he didn't realize before. When Morpheus talks about the Matrix in this film, he talks about, to your point, about how it was almost a perfect life for all human beings where there was nothing but happiness and, people were caring for each other. But eventually humans, they rejected it because we are so predisposition to see everything as suffering, violence, misery. They say that the brain, we're able to think about, we're more able to remember bad things that happen to us rather than good things. So it almost essentially was like a scattering of the brains for humans when they're dropped into this world where everything is perfect. But we all know that life isn't perfect. We all know that there are random occurrences that happen. We all know that whether we like it or not, sometimes there are going to be things that happen in life that don't make us happy, that don't please us, that leave a bad mark on us. And it's interesting to see that instead of, we always talk about we want to live in a perfect world, but we were given a chance to live in a perfect world in the Matrix, and essentially we all rejected it. So now we've been given this computer simulation, but essentially throughout the film, people know that's a simulation. There's a scene where Cypher, he is talking with with Agent Smith, and he's saying, I'm finna eat the steak in my mouth, and I know this steak is not real, but my brain makes me think that it's real. So we all are going along with the illusion that everything is perfect, that everything in this world makes sense. But in reality, we're being consumed and we're being used by artificial intelligence for energy. And it's almost like a boogeyman that we don't want. We know that's up under the bed, but we don't want to look at it.
So here's the thing too, is that like we are given this, what you're saying, like it's computer simulated world about how nothing is real in the world of the Matrix, right? But I mean, it both feels like suffering because like you have like Neo stuck at this like dead end job, right? Being this like computer programmer, a 9 to 5. I mean, like I enjoy my job, but it's never something that like I want to do for the rest of my life. Like I am currently in the process of like, I don't want to say trying to like outright leave, but like trying to make steps to do what I am passionate about doing. And on the flip side of that, you have the post apocalyptic, quote, real world where you get to like, it's basically Star Wars. It's just a more desolate version of Star Wars. So you kind of have to pick. It's like which of these hells do I want to live in for the rest of my life?
Yeah, it's kind of a pick your poison kind of thing. You can allow yourself to be okay. I want to live in this fantasy world. I want to live in a world where I'm going to be somebody instead of being a nobody, and I'm going to be able to eat all this great food and be able to indulge in all these pleasures. But at the end of the day, you kind of know that it's just a simulation. But the real world, everything is real in there, but it's very damp. It's dark. I mean, you're on the run from machines at the current time, and you have to eat this slop. Like there are scenes where they're inside the Nebuchadnezzar in the ship, and they're eating this kind of slop. It looks like a worse version of the worst version of oatmeal that you could ever eat. And this is all they eat because there is no other cities. You can't go to a Safeway or to an Albertsons or to a Walmart and go get some food. Like, no, this is all that you have left because there's only one human city left on the planet, and that's called Zion. And until the humans and machines are until one side wins this war, this is just how the way things are. And in a sense, yes, I want to live in reality, but also I want to be able to enjoy myself. And in this world, you can't really enjoy yourself at all because you're constantly in a state of survival.
Yeah, and if you're in the actual like post like the real world, like we'll call that world red world, because it's you're in constant survival. It's the scene where they're specifically trying to like dodge like the squid looking things, and they have to like shut off their engine just to like stay completely silent. And in the opposite world, I mean, yes, like they do say that like ignorance is bliss, but I mean, at some point, like you have to get fed up with ignorance and question, like, is there something more? Like, how many of us have looked around at our day to day lives, doing the same things, thinking the same things, repeating the same things, and saying there has to be something more. There has to be a God. There has to be, a force for a higher power, or there has to be something after this, whether that's heaven, hell, purgatory, whatever. That's a whole nother discussion, but eventually you are still left with that debilitating factor that like there has to be something more.
Yes, and I think when we see the journey of Neo throughout this film, what he essentially is looking is for something more. When we first see Neo, we see him slumped over at his computer chair, and he's essentially been working at his computer all night. And later in the film, Trinity and Morpheus, they essentially tell him, like, we know that you were looking for us. We know that you were looking for something to find a sense of balance, to find a sense of worth. I mean, because like you said before, and also I want to get into this point. In the year 1999, there were a lot of films that dealt with protagonists who were stuck in like these dead-end jobs and cubicles. I mean, there was Office Space, then there was Fight Club, then there was American Beauty, and then you also have this film, and you can also see in Neo's profession, when he's a computer hacker, he pretty much is just sitting at a desk all day just doing this work, and there's no enjoyment, there's no fulfillment, there's nothing really to look forward to except falling into a routine, the same routine day in and day out. And when Neo is introduced into the Matrix, and he takes the red pill and he sees this different layer of life that he didn't understand or didn't know existed, he's scared of it. He's scared of it because it breaks him out of his routine. It really destroys his mindset of what he thought life was. I mean, think about it. Think about it for us, that if we were one day just to wake up one day and someone comes to tell us like, hey, you know that house that you were living in, you know that job you were living, you know that car that you were driving in? Oh yeah, none of that really exists. That's all part of a little program that you've been a part of. You are a part of a simulation. And let me tell you what really this is all about. I mean, it would shock anybody. You wouldn't be able to make sense of it, and you would kind of almost fight against it. And Neo, he fights against it in the beginning. He says that it's all BS, that he wants to go back to what his life was. But Morpheus is like, well, you could go back, but you can go back knowing that this is not what your life really is. This is really what the real world is. And if you want to have a say-so in changing it or making it better, then you have to fight with us.
Yeah, we actually talked about this. We in our Night Watch episode for Abyss Gazing, the factor of like fate and how much of a predominant theme that is here. You know, do we choose our own will, or is it actually fate that has it out for us? And I think to your point about Neo specifically, before I kind of like go into the whole fate angle, is like he is so bored with his life that he is getting into the highly questionable illegal game of I was going to be real smooth with that, but I didn't. Computer hacking. He's got like his like side hustle, and he's like got two lives. He's Thomas Anderson in the real world, and then Neo on the online world, which we could talk about how like we could talk about the 1999 version of how dated this movie feels sometimes. But I want to go back to your point about fate. You know, we all have this like this idea of fate, and you know, sometimes there are some of us that believe that like every move that we make and every action is already predestined. And I think with this film in particular, that notion feels like really doubled down on, to where it's like we even see a scene between Oracle and Neo where like she's basically telling him everything he's going to do and everything he's going to think before it takes place, to kind of like double down on that point. And I think that's oftentimes some of people's, it's not the main problem, but it's one of the problems that exists when you get to talk to people about religion, is because, you know, am I really predestined to feel this way? Am I predestined to experience this pain or this tragedy, or undergo these mental health themes? And you know, we talked about in Night Watch, is like every decision you make is essentially free will. We choose our own path.
Yeah, the thing with humans is that, you know, some people would like to believe that there is a certain thing called fate, that things are already kind of mapped out for us. But at the same time, that defeats free will, that defeats individualism. We like to believe that the reason where we are at in life is because we made the choices to do so. And depending on where you are in life, some people don't like to believe that. Some people like to believe, oh, okay, I was cursed from the beginning and there was nothing I could really do about it. And then also be like, no, I did this, I did that. And it was all because of me. This is where I'm at now. Like, for example, me and my relationship. Like, you know how people like to say, hey, I found my soulmate. You know, it was fate that brought us together. But honestly, I feel that it's mostly personal choice. I mean, we choose to be with the person we're with. We choose to be with someone who feels compatible with us. We choose to be with someone who knows us, who we're not afraid to be ourselves around, who we know that will be there to their dying days, that someone that we could see ourselves like sticking with forever. And that's the object of where fate versus free will comes in. It's almost like the nature versus nurture debate. You know, how much of an effect does it have? And are you choosing to believe that, oh, I brushed my teeth this morning, but not because I chose to, but because it was fate for me to brush my teeth, or it was fate for me to go and it was fate to me to go into the store right now and get this meal that I wanted. You know, it's one of those dichotomies that can be studied and debated about for hours on end. And you could probably find people who will say on both sides, hey, maybe it could be both. Maybe it could be a sense of certain things are fate and other things are choices of our own. And in this film, we can see that Neo, he does make a choice. I mean, he had the choice of taking the blue pill and forgetting all about this and going back to his life and forgetting this ever happened. But he chose to go deeper into the rabbit hole, like Alice in Wonderland. He chose to go deeper to know what the truth is. And so I do feel like where the Matrix, it does have conversations about predestiny, but I think honestly it's a film about free will and making a choice to do something different.
I also think it's a film that's particularly made out of fear of what would the new millennium was going to hold.
Yeah.
Like, you know, predestination aside, like I'm not going to deny the fact that this film has those deep themes and that they are woven into the tapestry of not only this first film, but what I would imagine is the remainder of Neo's story up till even and including Resurrections. I do not doubt that for a second. My thing is though is that so much of this movie feels like 1999. And so like it's kind of hard for me to like, and I will also say that like some of the things that we talked about in Night Watch, like it's easier for me to accept some of that stuff. But for this film in particular, first off, all the coding looks like early 90s Game Boy. Let's just admit that right now. Second off, all the black leather. This was back when, 90s BDSM. No, it's not BDSM. No. Not BDSM. That's the wrong subculture I'm thinking of. The rave culture was like starting to like have a predominant effect in America. So you have a lot of that like influence here. And like in the 90s, we had this, and even in the 80s too, we had this habit of in films, particularly looking at the future from a current mindset. So it's not like the future in like today's like version of what we think 30 years is going to be. It's always this like way out there, like hover cars, and like we're going to be living in space and like the Jetsons. Like that's what this film in some ways feels like. And I feel like maybe that's the reason why your love for this film might have slightly gotten obscured, is just because of how dated it might be.
Yeah, man. In the early scenes where they're in the club and they're playing Rob Zombie in the club, I was like, yes, this very, very dated. And then you have the trench coats, and then you have the use of the soundtrack and also the manner of the special effects. I mean, at the time, bullet time.
The special effects.
I mean, at the time, I'm sure bullet time was revolutionary and it was something that had never been seen on film before. But now, since it's been done so many times over, it doesn't really have that new and eye-catching, grabbing effect that it has. I mean, it's kind of like a movie of its time. Like if you were in 1999, then this is like almost like revolutionary. It's almost like your Star Wars, if you wanted to think of it that way. But now looking back on it, it was a film that was trying to make sense of where the world was headed. I mean, this is on the eve of Y2K. where everybody thought that once the year 2000 came around, the world was going to end and stock markets were going to crash and people were stockpiling food and water bottles and people didn't know what was next. And added that to this year of 1999. When you look back at 1999, as far as the year of cinema, you had so many films that were going against the grain. I mentioned before Fight Club, American Beauty, and films like this. Like, these are films that were something new. They were doing something different from what was the norm. And it felt like that these were filmmakers' last grasp to do something before the world ended. Like, if you have a passion project, if you have a film that you've always wanted to make it in this year before everything turns to, sorry for my language, shit. But a lot of people say that The Matrix was going to get made either way. If it wasn't the Wachowski sisters, it was going to be somebody, because there was a lot of influences. There was particularly the Ghost in the Shell influence. There was a lot of anime. There was a lot of 70s and 80s action films that are implanted into The Matrix, and you have a lot of philosophical undertones in this film as well. If anybody has happened to get the Blu-ray or the 4K of The Matrix, I would highly recommend going through the commentaries. There's one commentary that focuses on the critics at the time, and they're talking about their reaction to the film. And then there's another commentary where you have philosophers talk about the deeper messages in the film. And given that this was the year before the new millennium, The Matrix was something that pushed action films into a whole new genre in itself. I mean, once you had bullet time and the way that slow motion was used, because slow motion was around even before The Matrix, but the way that you had where Neo just went all the way back and dodged bullets. I mean, people were replicating that everywhere. I remember in elementary school, kids were getting written up and suspended for doing the sequence out in school and trying to be their own Neo and everything. So we can say that it's dated now, but this is definitely, if we were around 1999, I'm pretty sure we'd probably be like fanboys of it.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
There's no denying the revolutionary aspects of this film and like what it did for like almost like reinventing the action genre and showcasing what the genre was capable of. I think that because you had some of the kung fu influences, I think that opened up and allowed America, at least the United States, the Western culture, to be more accepting of things like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, The One, and like so many other films a year later. And also gonna throw this one out there too. Blair Witch Project is another film as well that like really was revolutionary, and it is so much a product of its time, but you can't deny its importance for what it means for the landscape of cinema, because it really gave us a entire new subgenre of horror. And I think equally with The Matrix, we can look back and say, oh yeah, this movie is dated. However, you can't deny its importance. It's interesting watching this movie and seeing how influential certain parts are, and how other things have parodied it so many other times in their, you know, short films, feature length films, comedy sketches. Like there's so many Saturday Night Live sketches, there's Mad TV did sketches. I don't know if you watched the MTV movie awards growing up, but like they did their own versions of these things. And like this movie was deeply influential. It was deeply impactful, and it was able to really do things that it hadn't been done in film before. And like anytime that you are trying to, I don't want to say mixing and mashing, but when you're taking elements of different genres and you're trying to create something that's new and revolutionary, that's always dangerous and it's always hard. And this movie pulls from not only action, but it also has that gothic aesthetic to it. It has that noir feel to it also, but it also pulls from westerns and kung fu movies and martial arts as well, and it blends them in a really masterful way.
Yeah, most definitely. It's kind of one of those turning point films where you can't go back to the way things were after it was made. Like you had to change and come along with it, or you were going to be left in the dust. There's a podcast I listen to called The Rewatchables by The Ringer, and they talk about how The Matrix, they talk about market correction, where there were certain actors or certain films that came around where they changed the whole market and pretty much got rid of like everything else after it. So once The Matrix came out, then pretty much slow motion was the way to go. I remember as a kid playing games like Max Payne and seeing slow motion in there, and I tell you not that it would not be in there. It wouldn't be a part of the game if it wasn't for The Matrix. I can tell you that certain aspects of science fiction movies change after The Matrix. They became a little bit more action oriented, and this is true of the sequels of The Matrix. Reloaded is almost like an action blockbuster version of this film. And The Matrix is still an action blockbuster, but in this film, the story is more of the onus. The world building is more of an onus than essentially getting into the sequels where the action really takes the cake. You get to learn about what the Matrix is. You get to learn about the construct, which is one of the coolest parts of the film, where Neo is essentially... The guy tells him, hey, you can learn anything with this loading program. I can load in Kung Fu. I can load in Jiu-Jitsu. I can load in combat training. And you'll be able to note it in the blink of an eye. Me and my girlfriend are kind of sitting by each other. It's like, wouldn't that be cool? Like to be able to download a program to where you can learn karate within an instant and be able to know karate. Now, I can see how this would be used badly. There'll be people out there trying to download all kinds of programs to know about everything, which was essentially almost overload your mind in a sense. But in The Matrix, you also got the sense that in the future, anything is limitless. And because it takes place in 2199, we're not even in, 2046. We're in 2199, 200 years away from 1999. And the future, there's not really the flying cars and the jetpacks and everything like that. We're stuck dealing with computer simulations, and then we're stuck dealing with almost the extinction of the human species. And the reason why The Matrix exists is because we as humans, we gave up our world to technology. We gave it up to AI. And what is the biggest fear that we have now in our world is that technology is essentially starting to take over. We're worried about people losing their jobs to robots. We're worried about artificial intelligence being able to become smarter than us and be able to turn it against us and make us guinea pigs. I mean, there have been countless news articles in the last few years where they talk about social media algorithms and how, now we're to a point where the algorithm can't be stopped. Like Facebook, Twitter, all these things that power it, we have no control over it anymore. We kind of let it run amok. And now social media has become almost a place where controversy and misinformation and anger can kind of just be free and be able to run without any limits. And if you want to try to put limits, you can't do it. And so the Matrix is also, it's almost a warning to us about humans, about how naive we can be, like how we think we're so much smarter than everybody, but sometimes the choices we make can lead to our downfall, which is what's happening now.
Oh, I would dare to say that we've been testing that way before the Matrix was even a concept. There's so much 50s sci-fi that is wrapped around this concept of being in the future, but also the dangers of artificial intelligence and AI is really taking form and taking over. And to your point, I think that, it is a common fear. For years, I didn't want a Google Home in my home. And because I'm like, well, I don't, I don't want them listening. But I mean, if you have a phone, they're listening. The algorithms, they're constantly listening. I was just telling my wife the other day, like I went down to visit a friend down in Alabama, one of our staff writers here, and I slept when I was down there. I slept every night with his wiener dog, and I was talking to my wife over the phone, and I was telling her about the dog, and now my Instagram suggests recommendations are of wiener dogs ever since that trip. So it's like, whether you know it or not, like you are being heard. And I think that there's a very real concern about us, being able to be heard and, slowly kind of stepping in towards the sentiment of iRobot. That's kind of a terrifying thought, to feel so powerless. Because I mean, honestly, like the feeling of powerlessness, it is a terrifying thought. I don't fear much in life, but that is one of the biggest fears that I have, is being able to be in a position to where I can't feel like I can change the circumstances of what I'm feeling emotionally, physically, or even spiritually. Like, I don't ever want to have anyone feel that way, and I don't want to feel it myself.
Yeah, I mean, the sense of not having control over your life is something that I wouldn't wish for anybody to be in a situation. And I remember a few years ago when I was in a relationship with my ex-girlfriend, and it felt like I was in a prison of my own making, and there was no way I could be able to get out. And I had no way of getting out if I wanted to. Like, the choice for me to get out was not there for me because of certain other circumstances that were surrounding me. So the feeling of no control is something that makes sense for everybody to be very terrified about. And you never want to be in a situation to where hope even can't save you. Another reason for the Matrix, the reason why it's so good, and how it's, this is the part where it's not feel dated, is that when Morpheus talks to Neo and he says that not everybody can be saved. There are many people who, even if you tell them the truth about what's going on, they don't want to hear it. They want to pretend like it doesn't exist. And at a certain point, you can't be saved. People can become stuck in their ways. They can be stuck into believing this delusion, a fantasy, to where they don't want to leave it at all. And Morpheus tells you that there's a certain limit. We can't save everybody, but past a certain age, a person's mind will be resistant to change, in a sense. So until then, they are our enemy, but we have to try and save as many people as we can. And the way that parallels it to the real world is that, think about what we have now with the COVID pandemic and how people are believing these crazy and zany theories about what's going on and believing that there's not really even a real virus. And you try to talk to these people, you try to have a conversation with them, and they don't want to listen to you. They don't want to hear anything else. They just want to believe that they're living in this world where people are out to get them. People are out to kill them. People are out to put them and put microchips into their body. People are out to, put them in, leave them as cattle, or put them into a prison or a jail they're making. When the reality is much more simpler and much more authentic to what's going on. And with the Matrix, you have to come to the realization that not everybody can be saved. People are going to be stuck living in this computer simulation world, and there's kind of nothing that you can really do about it. And that kind of makes me kind of wary, because I know for me, I'm a selfless person. I'm a caring person. If I see somebody who's going through dire times or who's in danger or something, I want to try and warn them. I want to try and tell them and put them onto a more safer path. But at the end of the day, you realize you can't save everybody. And it's a sobering lesson, but it's truthful.
Yeah, and that kind of is like the flip side of powerlessness, is that in what Morpheus is saying is essentially correct. Like, there are, I've been doing mental health advocacy for the better part of over 10 years now, and some of the people that I've tried to be there for have still lost their lives to suicide, have still given into that temptation. And that is one of the worst feelings in the world, is to feeling like you want to save everyone, but knowing that you can't. It is one of the many faults of being human. I think it kind of goes back to that Batman versus Superman debate, where we all want to be Superman, but in the reality is we're all Batmans, because like we have to take time to rest, like we have to take time to recharge, like we have to take time to actually take care of our own self and our own needs. And the case for that is, it's gotta be, hey, like, take care of yourself first, and understand that you're not going to be able to impact everyone the way that you want to. And you just have to kind of make peace with that. Like, it sounds like a really terrible thing to say, but honestly, when you are doing what we do, you kind of have to look at it that way. I mean, you have to understand that, like, you're not going to be able to help everyone. And even if you can't help, there are certain situations that, like, you might not be able to exactly speak to, but there's someone else out there that can. And I guess I'm still talking for, like, through the mental health. That's why we have so many different, like, resource things, is that we don't want just the generalization of, like, the suicide prevention hotline, because there are some things that, like, veterans, not everyone understands the harms of war. And then there's the LGBT community. Not everyone understands the depths of what it means to be in that community, and the process of transition or coming out, and bullying and ridiculing it, and so many other things, that there are designated spots like the Trevor Project that are terrific for that. And at the end of the day, like, for me, like, I had to kind of make peace with that fact of, being powerless, is that there are other things out there that I might not be able to save everyone, but I can point someone in the direction to get the help that they need.
Beautifully put, man. I mean, I couldn't say it any better. I also feel that during the Matrix, the feeling I kind of got is that, you can't live life in a perpetual state of fear. In a sense, you have to choose to actively live life. Like, you can't just be passive and just waiting around for things and hoping that they can become good again, or just waiting around and just stuck into the same choices and routines every day and thinking that things are going to be different. I mean, Albert Einstein said that sanity is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. And the thing with Neo choosing to go down a rabbit hole of the Matrix is that he's making an active choice to do something about his life. And, I'm not trying to speak or say that, if a person is not where they at in life, that they chose to be that way. No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that, at a certain point, if there's a part of your life that feels kind of unfulfilled, that feels like that you could be doing something much better, what's the worst thing in trying to change your situation? What's the worst thing in doing something different? And who cares what people say about it? I mean, I think people, the Matrix talks about that you can live in a prison of your own mind. And I think that we as a people sometimes live in a prison of our own mind. We live in a prison of about what other people think about us, about what we're doing. Oftentimes people will say, hey, I wish I could do this, but what would people say about me? Like, oh, my family, they'll disown me after this, and at a certain point, you have to realize that your life is your life. And the only way that it's going to get better or that it's going to be different is if you choose, if you make that decision to do so. And what we could take away from Neo, this guy who at first was fighting against, him being the one, him being the Messiah that could help end the war against the machines. Eventually he comes around to it and he realizes his own power, his own self-awareness, his own, courage, and him getting rid of all that fear. I mean, at the end, when he's battling with Agent Smith and it feels like that he's about to become another casualty, because throughout the film, they talk about how no other person, has been able to touch an agent. They haven't been able to shoot at them. They haven't been able to beat them or harm them at all. Like everybody who's got in contact with an Agent Smith has been killed. But Neo was able to break that cycle. He was able to defeat the agents. He was able to understand that, yes, this is who I'm supposed to be. I'm supposed to be the guy who stops this. I'm supposed to be the guy who wins this war. I'm supposed to be the guy who gives humans another chance at living on this planet and not just being an energy source for machines. And it's very powerful, when you look at that. And for somebody, it's, when we go back to the mental health angle, sometimes people out there need to feel like that they have power in their life. And it's not something that deals with money or about a position or a certain status. It's about a person knowing that they can do something about it, that they have the strength to do it. If they feel weak, they can understand that, hey, no, I have strength. I have the autonomy to be who I want to be. And who cares if people rejoice in that or if they hate that? At the end of the day, your life is your life.
Yeah, that goes back to the whole free will versus destiny thing. But, when you look at free will specifically, like what you're saying, like we have the tools necessary to better ourselves for our life. If you are in a position where you don't currently like your job or the job's not paying enough for you, we're in a market right now where there are hundreds, if not thousands, of employees and employers that are looking to bring in new people and to bring in new fresh faces that are eager to work and are eager to talk and are eager to do something new and are looking for those fun and exciting times. And I think going back to the mental health angle, like there are so many things that I feel like can honestly keep us from doing stuff. Fear, and fear's a great one, because fear kind of holds our life at a standstill to where, but at the end of the day, like we choose whether to give into that fear or to live with that or to reject that fear. Like we have that power and that authority to say that. And I think also to, Neo's Neo's case is here you have a guy that kind of quite literally like didn't really believe in himself until Morpheus was captured, and then from there was able to kind of recognize the faith in himself that what the Oracle specifically told him wasn't necessarily true because he had to decide it for himself. And that process of coming to peace with the things that you can control is something that truly is worth getting up for in the morning, knowing that we might not have total power and total control over every aspect of our lives, but there's a good chunk of it that we do have power and authority over.
Yeah, man. Truth, 100% truth right there. The one thing that struck me on this rewatch that I never had noticed before was the character of Agent Smith. Agent Smith is the nemesis of Neo, if you can say. He is pretty much a sentient program. He is built for only one thing, which is to get rid of humans, be able to put humans away into these pods to be used as energy for artificial intelligence. And there's a scene where after the agents have captured Morpheus and Agent Smith and Morpheus are having a conversation, Agent Smith talks about, I don't want to be here on this planet anymore. I don't like any of you humans. I don't like the way you smell. I don't like touching you. I don't like it at all. I'm just here to do my job, which is to get rid of all of you. And then I can be done for. I don't have to live here anymore. So in a sense, Agent Smith, yes, he's a villain and he's working for the evil side, but this is almost something he doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to have to be on this earth anymore, chasing down people and killing them. He's in a sense tired as well of his situation. He also knows that this world is essentially built as a simulation, but he has one focus in mind, and he's pretty much a robot who's built for one purpose only. And that was one thing I never really noticed when I watched the Matrix films back in the day. That Agent Smith is essentially a robot. He's a machine himself that is there for only one solid purpose, which is to get rid of anybody who is fighting against the machines, get rid of the revolution, and make sure that the world is only controlled by artificial intelligence.
But even him in that scene you're talking about in particular has that sense of free will to where he's like, he strips himself of all the connections that he has to the larger body and says, like you said, like, I don't like you humans, like, but I don't like being in this position even more. And there's a line in particular, and I honestly, I think if Morpheus said it, but I didn't write down who said it. It says that they said that I can show you the door, but you're the one who has to walk through it. And I love that line because, we create content specifically to deconstruct the stigma of conversation around mental health, suicide prevention, and anxiety and depression, and these really hard to navigate topics. But at the end of the day, like, it has to be your free will to look into those resources. It has to be your free will to make that change and say, I've had it with this depression. I've had it with this anxiety. I'm going to go to a doctor, or I'm going to consult a therapist, or look into these resources, or even just Google resources. And I think that there's so much of this film that's wrapped up in those themes of having characters that are told one thing but yet have the free will because they to do something completely different, and they go for it. I think you see Agent Smith going against that. You have Neo going against that. And even to a degree, you have Cypher going against that. And I just want to reiterate that there is hope, that there are a plethora of resources. Like, this podcast is the door, but at the end of the day, like, you also have to choose to walk through that door.
Yeah, man. Exactly. I wanted to ask you a question, because
Sure.
you were talking about how this has been your first time watching this in like 20 years and whatnot and everything. So I wanted to kind of gauge your thoughts on everything. So what exactly really worked for you this time around and what didn't? I know we already talked about the idea of it being dated, which is understandable, but what didn't really work for you and what did work for you this time around?
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
All right, I hit the wrong button. All right. What worked for me and what didn't work for me? That is a great question as I pull up my letterbox review. Because I have watched so much Spider-Man movies since I watched The Matrix. That is a great question. For me, I don't know. Like it was one of those movies that, like, growing up, I was like, man, like I'm absolutely here for this, and um, it's one of those films that I think we've talked about it a lot in here. It's, for as much as it is dated, it also, we talk about how it takes influence from other things, and one of my complaints is that I'm pretty sure this movie ripped off a little bit of its subplot from Nightmare on Elm Street, but that's neither here nor there. I think that it's the philosophical motivations of the characters, the way that it's conspiracy theories kind of line up, like the themes of like alternate realities. The action sequences are really good. I will say the slow motion action scenes kind of get redundant really fast, because I think we're like what, 10 minutes into this movie, and like Trinity has like that like weird crouching tiger like pose, and then she gets all the agents, and I don't know, man. The action sequences connect, the slow motion gets redundant over time, but I think for me, like, on this review, this rewatch, like it's really the themes of the characters, and just the pacing of this movie. Like, the pacing is done really well. It never drags. It's always continuously moving forward, whether it's characters having these deeper conversations or you're balancing that out with the action. I think it's just the Wachowskis did a really good job at balancing all of those things really well.
Yeah, we talked about it before we came live that I used to think of this film as a 5-star film. It was one of my essentials, something that I know I could go back. I can go on 20, 30 years from now and still watch it, still have that same feeling. But I noticed this time around that I didn't have that same feeling. I don't know whether it's because I've seen it too many times, or because things do feel a little bit dated now, and because there are certain aspects of the story that do feel a little bit draggy in the middle parts of it. I still enjoy the action. The action is still great. I mean, of course, everybody will talk about the bullet time sequence, but the shootout in the building lobby, I think, ranks as my favorite scene of the whole film. I mean, just the way that the walls and the bricks are just like bouncing all over the room, and then you have the slow motion, and then you have the guns and everything. Great scene. You know, I heard Will Smith was originally supposed to be Neo, and Val Kilmer was supposed to be Morpheus. Now I don't know how that film would have turned out. A part of me kind of wants it, but I think Keanu in his lead role. I mean, I don't think I could picture anybody else being Neo, honestly, and I don't think I could picture anybody being Morpheus. You know, as far as Laurence-Fishburne and Trinity, Carrie-Annemoss. You know, Carrie-Annemoss wasn't really a big name until this film came out, and Keanu was a name. You know, he had did Point Break, he had did Speed, so he was kind of known as the action hero. And this film continued on that track, but now we know Keanu as John Wick and everything. So it's been crazy to see how his career has just like progressed in him being these iconic characters. I think the Wachowski sisters did a great job with this story. They brought in a lot of philosophical themes, a lot of narrative tissue that sticks in your mind long after you watch it. You know, after I watch this film, I always try to go online and I try to catch like discussions on Reddit or on different message boards about the themes of the film and about why characters were written the way they were, or why was this line right here, or why was this world built like this. And it's very interesting. It's a film that definitely does grow more in value when you rewatch it. But would I say it's like an all-time classic in the form of like a Shawshank Redemption or a Godfather or a Star Wars? I can't put it in that discussion, but it's a very important film. It's an influential film in the action genre, and that's a high mark if you want one.
Yeah, I totally agree. You know, going back to the landscape of 1999, there was, like we talked about earlier, like there was so many experimental films that influenced their respective genres. You know, I brought up Blair Witch earlier, and we're talking about The Matrix, and The Matrix specifically over like the next like 5 to 10 years brought in so many spoofs. Like I'm pretty sure that there are Nickelodeon like toddler spoofs of The Matrix. Like that just demonstrates really how influential this film was. And I think that it has such a rich tapestry. And another thing too that I think this film does really well is its mythology. It is based enough into science that's not completely far-fetched like it is in Star Wars and Star Trek, but there's enough grounded realism in this to say that this is actually a future that like I could see myself living in come 2199. Like to where the point of, you know, let's be honest, like, you know, we try to keep hope here, but we also are going to be realism is that like some of our resources are running out, quite literally. Like, and you know, I think it starts off with very minimal things, and it eventually grows to you get that like Earth shot of what the Earth in 2199 looks like, where Morpheus even says he says it's somewhere around the year 2199. But we can't confirm that because we don't know how to keep track of days anymore. And I think that, you know, that sense of realism mixed with what they're bringing in as far as the tech angle of it and the mythology, I think it just blends together really richly.
Yes, you know, The Matrix is just a watershed film that I think it's gonna last longer than us. You know, we'll be long dead and gone, but 200, 300 years from now, people are still gonna be watching The Matrix, and maybe they'll be watching the other sequels that would get made in that time. I mean, who knows if Resurrections will be the only sequel made? Maybe depending on the success of this new film, they might decide to do another Matrix film. Who knows? You know, it's a world where you could spin off with so much from this world. Like you could have a Matrix film where you only focus on the Adventures of Trinity. You could have a Matrix film where you focus on how did they build the Matrix? Because in the next sequels, you get to meet the architect. the guy who built the actual Matrix and in Matrix Reloaded. You know, they could have had a solo film about him. And it's a wide spanning universe that, you know, is not just an action film and it's not just a science fiction film. I mean, this film spawns through many genres, and it can touch a lot of people in the audience. Not really heartfelt, but it can touch a lot of people as so like, oh, have you seen this film? Like, oh, like I'm probably couldn't imagine what it was like in 1999 when people were going to the theater watching this. You know, it's I like to do this thing where if there's a film I like to watch, I like to go back and read the early reviews about it or read what the early reactions were to it. And I remember hearing about The Matrix and reading about it and how people were just blown away by it. It was just something they had never seen before. And it was going to lead to a whole different way that we were going to look at Hollywood and filmmaking, and a way that you could build worlds inside of a film, of a narrative story. I mean, I'm excited for how you're going to feel about Reloaded and Revolutions, because those films are very divisive, especially Revolutions. But my auntie, she was the one who had got me into the Matrix as a kid, and she loved all of these films. And I hope that we can give that to people. I hope that, you know, through our discussions, we can help people see, you know, how big these films were, and maybe make people new fans of them. You know, hopefully, I hope that we gave enough of a confident nod for people to go out and watch this film if you haven't seen it already. And if you haven't, you must have been living under a rock.
Well, I mean, it is now streaming on HBO Max. As of this recording, I always have to throw that in there because it's the way streaming services work. But I want to ask you this last question, man. I can't believe we didn't open this podcast up with this question: is would you take the red pill or the blue pill?
Ah, man, I thought about it when that scene came up. I had to think about it. You know, me, I'm a curious guy. You know, curiosity is my thing. I love learning about new things. I love going down rabbit holes. You know, I love things that are outside of what is expected, or, you know, what is known as general knowledge. For me, I probably would have taken the red pill, but I can't lie and tell you that maybe the blue pill would be a little bit more comfortable choice to make. I mean, who wouldn't?
So I feel like for me, it would depend on the circumstances of what the blue world was. Like if I was in a position where like maybe I wasn't like 100% thrilled, but like I had a wife that like I love. Like if it was my version of my life now, like I would completely be like, all right, I'm here for this. Like I got a good community of friends. I got a good church group. I have a beautiful wife that I love. I have 2 awesome cats. You know, we do victims and villains, you know, biz gazing, that's high praise. Like I'm all for like staying here. But I would also say at the same time that I'm right there with you. Like I would want to see the red just to kind of be awoken. Though I don't know if I would necessarily want to go through, you know, that whole like being birth process and not having eyebrows. Kind of scares me.
Oh no, the birthing process is still a scene that freaks me out, especially when especially when he touches the mirror and the mirror starts to cover his whole body, and essentially he is like woken up and he's like in this pod and he has all these things attached to his arms and skin. It's still a scene that freaks me out, and especially I'm kind of claustrophobic. I hate being in tight spaces, so yeah. If I can have the journey without going through any of that, I'm down for it. If I have to go through with it, then maybe blue pill might be my best shot.
Well, see, that's the thing about the red pill is that you never know what's on the other side. So it's like, oh man. But I mean, you could always take the cipher route and like, you know, just be like, I want to be reborn as a billionaire, a movie star. Like, I don't want to remember none of this stuff.
Yeah, because ignorance is bliss at the end of the day.
I mean, I think that goes back to the, you know,
what George Orwell wrote for 1984. Talking about how ignorance is bliss. There are some things that some information that I've come across unintentionally that I'm like, I could have literally gone my entire life not knowing that, and yet here I am. Not just they subliminally giving out red pills, man. I'm telling you.
Hey,
it's in the water.
The truth shall set you free.
Yeah, that's yeah. All right, man. Well, the last thing I want to do is, as we're going through this series, I want to rank these. So obviously, I'm just gonna put this in your idea, but let's put this through a Rorschach rating scale, and we're gonna see after this series which Matrix is really the best one. Which one? Where does this land for you?
This one lands for me. I mean, it's easily taking the number one spot. I mean, we'll see how Reloaded and Revolutions have aged, but this one right now is taking the number one spot, clear and simple.
So, I kind of think that I'm going to say the same thing. I think that's my prediction coming into these rankings, is that I don't know enough about 4 to see what it's going to hold. Animatrix, I'm kind of curious about, but I also, if Reloaded and Resolutions are as divisive as people say, and they're a lot like other franchises, I think it'll be interesting to see how the Matrix 99 stacks up against its other franchise.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be an interesting journey down the rabbit hole, as they say.
Well, we will be back next week. If you guys make sure that you guys hit subscribe and follow wherever you guys get your podcast from. We'll be talking about Matrix Reloaded on our journey to doing Matrix Resurrections. But where can people find you online and find more information about Feeling Film Podcast?
Well, you can find us on Twitter under Feeling Film. You can find us on Facebook, and you can find me on Facebook under my real name, Caless Davis, Cales. You can also find me on Letterboxd under Black Nerd Magic. You can find me on Instagram as Black Nerd Magic. And also check out Feeling Film Podcast. We are great friends with you, and we often mention you in our episodes, especially when it comes to certain films that we know is right up your alley. So check out some of our episodes, and also check out Feeling Film Black Label as well.
Yeah, I'm still waiting on more episodes of that.
It's been tough, man. Everybody's schedule is just out of whack right now, but hopefully we can get something done in the near future, hopefully.
Well, I'm hoping for it, because I truly love you guys' discussions over there on Black Label. You guys can follow me. I am Captain Nostalgia on Letterboxd. You guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, which we are also streaming to right now, and YouTube as well. You guys can go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can get access to all of our social media, like I just mentioned, Patreon, more podcasts like this, movie reviews, our mental health, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. It's victimsandvillains.net. But you can also, too, if you're a filmmaker, you can also submit your film right now to our first ever film festival, Horrific Hope, which is going to be April 29th and 30th. Go to filmfreeway.com/Horrific Hope Film Festival. And again, we'll have those links in the descriptions. But this episode of The Matrix is winding down. We will be reloading The Matrix in 7 days. So until next time, go down the rabbit hole. Take the red pill.